Comeback, that's right. I've already looked at this vehicle once. I've spent many hours on it, and it's going to be a difficult diagnosis, and I'll explain why. Difficult diagnosis. Why is it a difficult diagnosis? Well, it's a difficult diagnosis because 99.9% of the time that I spend on this vehicle, there is nothing wrong with it, and it's really hard to fix something that isn't broke. So just like my previous difficult diagnosis video, it involved driving the customer's vehicle home, and that's what I'm about to do on this vehicle. Hopefully the audio will be acceptable and I'll be able to explain the situation and tell the story. Otherwise, I'll do it when I get home and we'll talk about it. Okay, Pico Lab Scope is going. We are recording data. Let's talk about the backstory on this vehicle. This vehicle is a 2024 Chevy Colorado with a I can't remember the size of the engine, but it's the L3B 4-cylinder. The vehicle has 9,398 miles at this moment. Previously, the first time that I ever looked at it, it had about 5,000 miles. And this all started after an oil change, okay? So the customer brought the vehicle back after the oil change and said, hey, what did you guys screw up? My truck runs like garbage now. It was given to me for diagnosis, and it was described as like a misfire, jerking, bucking, check engine light flashing, etc. I ended up driving it, and I discovered that the fault is basically nearly impossible to duplicate. I drove the vehicle over 100 miles. I spent at least 4 hours of diagnostic time over the course of multiple drives and parking it and coming back to it, etc. And basically felt like I was spinning my wheels and I didn't get anywhere. And we'll talk about what I've already done to the vehicle when we get there. Like I said, as you can see, it is getting dark. I'm driving this vehicle home after hours, and I'm working after hours because otherwise I would never have enough time to produce a video. This sort of job just sucks up way too much time. And of course, prior to me deciding that I will make a video on this, I've already driven the vehicle 20 miles and had no symptoms, no codes, no problems. I'm driving it home right now. It's running just fine. I'm loading it up. I can accelerate. This is all simulated on a test track, so none of this is real. But it just requires a lot of drive time with nothing wrong with the vehicle, and that is what makes this a difficult diagnosis. Is there is nothing wrong with it 99.9% of the time that I am operating the vehicle. What can I do in that situation? I almost have to just lay a trap where I think I'm going to find the problem. And that's why, while I'm driving home, I've got the PicoScope connected to some circuits that we'll talk about in a minute to monitor. If the fault does occur, I will be able to capture the fault on the PicoScope and actually get an idea of what exactly is happening to cause this problem. Still running just fine, pulling this hill, absolutely no problems. No symptoms have shown up. I've spoken to the customer, and he said that ever since the first visit and the first repair was performed, he's only experienced the problem 2 times ever since then. So that's been about 4,000 miles since then, and he's only experienced the problem 2 times until today. Today is when it actually got bad enough that he decided it would be towed in, and what do you know? I get in it, it starts right up, no check engine light, no faults, runs great. We did have some code stored, and again, it's a comeback with the same code that we had previously. We will go over that when I get home. Well, I made it home with absolutely no faults. What can I do from here? I guess we'll talk about it. Well, I drove it all the way home while monitoring data on the PicoScope, and nothing happened. No codes, no symptoms. Engine ran great, pulls hills just fine, accelerates fine. This just makes for a difficult diagnosis, so I'm going to move some things around in the garage and pull it in so we can have some more light, and then I'll actually fill you in and show you what's going on here. Well, I can't pull it all the way into the garage because I've got a dead BMW blocking the way. Only the real ones know about that, though. So now that we're in the garage, and to summarize the backstory for those of you that skipped that part, the vehicle came in shortly after an oil change with a complaint of, ever since you did my oil change, the engine runs rough, doesn't shift right. He actually thought it was a transmission concern. I was dispatched to diagnosis. I checked codes. There were no codes. I drove this thing all over the place, and just when I thought I was about to give up and just hand them back, hey, I can't duplicate it, it did actually fault out on me on the way back to the shop. So I decided, okay, we do actually have a problem here. The fault, the best I could describe, would be kind of like a spark plug or a spark plug wire that had a problem. It really felt like an ignition misfire. Very hard to duplicate. Had to load up the engine. Really, I mean, exactly what you would do if you were chasing after a secondary ignition misfire. Loaded this thing up, and that was really the only time I could ever get it to act up. It would buck and jerk and you know. And I was, of course, monitoring the misfire data with the scan tool, and I found that cylinder 4 was logging misfires at times under those serious load conditions. Like, this is a turbocharged engine. I had to really load it down and get the turbo spooling, and just very hard to duplicate. So I brought it back to the shop. I decided that I would take out the spark plug on cylinder 4 and just take a look at it, because, like I said, it did feel like a secondary ignition misfire. It's just a stutter that would come and go for a split second. And so I dug down and did the cylinder 4 spark plug, which just that cylinder 4 spark plug calls for 2 hours to take that out and put it back in. So I replaced the cylinder 4 plug just because of how much labor is involved in accessing it. And I swapped cylinder 4 ignition coil up to cylinder 1, drove it again, and still had the same problem. Again, no code setting until I ended up driving it even further. I drove it, and finally I was able to induce the fault enough times that the ECM was finally setting a code, and at that time it was misfiring continuously. Check engine light flashing, and cylinder 4 was dead. This thing was just running terrible. Brought it back, and it was just dead miss on cylinder 4, popping out the exhaust and all that. And what do you know? I shut the key off, started it back up, and runs great. So that's where we got the P2156 code. I misspoke earlier and said P2157. It's P2156. Cylinder 4 injector circuit high, or high circuit, shorted low, or something like that. And I ended up chasing the cylinder 4 circuits, and I have the wiring diagram right here. Fast forward to today, and the vehicle is towed in approximately 3,000 to 4,000 miles later. The first fault was at about 5,000 miles. Today we've got just over 9,000 miles. Customer showed me a video of the check engine light flashing, etc., running poorly, and I basically thought to myself, yeah, we probably have the same problem going on. And I ended up scanning codes, and yes, we do have the same code for cylinder 4 injector, or cylinder 4 high circuit. There's a high and a low, and we'll talk about that. But this code basically suggests that the high circuit of the injector is shorted low at some point, and whenever that happens, the cylinder 4 injector will be completely disabled. So that explains why, when I was actually able to replicate the fault long enough, hard enough, that the cylinder 4 misfire became continuous with the flashing check engine light. That's totally to be expected. I even expected that when I shut the key off and started it back up, I expected that it would run just fine, because
hey, it's a super intermittent fault. It only occurred just long enough for the ECM to detect it and do something about it, but not long enough to be present in the next key cycle. So okay, here is a view of the code stored, P2156. Ignore the P124B code. I induced that when I was screwing around with it. Let's take a look at the wiring schematic. Theoretically, this should be a really easy diagnosis. Fuel injector 4. The code that is setting is for circuit 4904 being shorted low. And like I said, theoretically, this should be a really easy diagnosis. There's only 2 wires and an injector and an ECM. So the problem here is that you can't actually get to any of that. The injectors are underneath the intake manifold, underneath all that mess stuff. The ECM's over here. I actually had to unbolt this and pull this out of its normal location. I'll show you what it looks like in its normal location after I'm done, but I had to pull that out for access. We do have an inline connector, X160, and to build on what I said about what I have already done to the vehicle. So I said that I spent hours, literally hours, driving this vehicle around with no results. I drove it over 100 miles and just could not get it to duplicate again. After the 1 or 2 times that I actually duplicated it, I couldn't do it again. And I decided, what did I do? I disconnected ECM X3 and I tested continuity across these 2 wires, circuit terminal 49 and 50. And I can't remember what exactly I measured, but I know that I compared it to the other injectors and everything was fine. So the wiring at the time of the test was okay. The injector was okay at the time of the test. I had ECM X3 pulled out, and that's the one that I have my wires connected to. I had it pulled out. I did the terminal tension test on terminal 49 and 50, and that was okay. And I wiggle tested the wiring harness. So obviously the ECM's over here and the injectors are over here. The wiring has to go from one side to the other. So I wiggled the harness, I grabbed it, pulled it, whatever. Never could duplicate the fault. I checked X160, and to do that, I had to actually remove the intake manifold. And so I removed the intake manifold. I tested terminal tension at X160. I tested terminal tension at the injector directly, and I found no problems. So the wiring tests okay, the injector tests okay, the terminal tension here, 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 and here all tests okay. And I have a vehicle that is now sucking up so much of my time that I can't get other things done. And the customer obviously needs his vehicle back. So at that point, I spun the wheel. I'm like, I suspect we have a harness issue. So I decided to replace the sub harness, which includes X160 and all of the sub harnesses to the injectors. It's like a short section of wire with a main connector. So I replaced that, reassembled, and like I said, the customer has not experienced the problem only a few more times since then, and it's back in my lap today as a comeback. Okay, so if you are still following along, I've tested the wiring, I've tested the injectors, I've tested terminal tension, I replaced the injector sub harness, everything seemed to be fine. I gave it back to the customer, and here we are 4,000 miles later. It's got the same code, same symptoms, and once again, I cannot duplicate it no matter, I mean, I've put 40 miles on it thus far, not a single problem. I spoke with a field service engineer about this. He called me up on something unrelated just to check in and say hi. I talked to him about it, and we both kind of agreed that we need to connect the PicoScope to that injector circuit and monitor the injector trigger from the ECM, the control side, as well as injector current, so that we can determine if the injector is being triggered and failing to open, or if it is a circuit that is shorting low somehow, like a rubbed harness or something. And of course, I did all that and no problems. And I've got the Picos hooked up for my ride home, no symptoms.
I almost don't even know what to do anymore. But today I did experience the problem only one time, and that was only when I was like poking my probes in here. I'll show you.
Okay, let's correlate this to the wiring schematic. The high circuit, injector high 4904, this is the suspect circuit, blue and white, and the low side control, gray and blue. The Pico, the blue lead, channel A, I've got on the blue and white wire, and channel B I've got on the gray and blue wire. This is the high control, the low control, and I've got a low amp clamp connected around that injector wire so I can measure my amperage. Okay, we're entering year 2025 with screen recording technology. The Pico's going. I'm working by myself, so I'm going to be using the remote start. And stop that. Let's go ahead and zoom in. And we'll take over on the screen recording. Let's zoom in on this very first injection event. What we have here is blue line, remember, is the injector high, green line is injector low, and red is current. So let's zoom in on this very first injection event. This is a GDI peak and hold injector. I believe it's made by Bosch system. And up here we've got about 65 volts because these injectors use 65 volts to open the injector. And notice when that blue high side line jumped up to 65 volts, we started to have current flowing on that injector. And the fact that we have this smooth, gradual ramp, the current ramp, kind of implies that the injector is okay. When you see these little humps in the current ramp, that means that the injector pintle actually opened, so we are able to mechanically see, did the injector actually open? Yes, it did. And once the ECM saw it start to open, you can see that it began to modulate the voltage to kind of keep it open. And then once that injector was either open enough or whatever, the current starts to fall, and we are modulating at about 12 volts on and off to keep the injector held open. Remember, peak and hold. So here's the peak, here's the hold. We're holding it open, modulating it. This is the injector pintle actually dancing up and down, opening and closing. And then finally the injector is turned off by the ECM, and we see the current drop to nothing. This is a normal waveform for this injector and this injector circuit. So what I was hoping to accomplish with this measurement is when the fault does occur and it actually starts misfiring on cylinder 4, I'll be able to monitor whether this circuit is going away or being shorted to ground as the code suggests, or do we have a problem on the low side? I kind of doubt that. Or am I going to find that this high side control circuit is completely normal and the injector just simply fails to open or is shorted when it's hot or something? You could see all of that with this Pico. We just need to induce the fault. We need it to be broken. And that's where the difficulty lies. So yeah, that's the backstory on this P2156 code. The challenge has just been to actually get it tacked up and be broken long enough to diagnose it. And like I said, the one time I did actually experience the problem was when I was screwing with that ACM connector and I probed in too far. So probed in too far on this one. We'll see if I can get it to do it again. See that? I just probed it in a little bit and we've dropped cylinder 4. And that's basically what happened to me the first time, and that's what happened to the customer. And I'll show you what happens when we shut the vehicle off. and restart it. So I pulled my probe back the way it was, new key cycle. Engine runs just fine again. So that's something that the ECM is going to do normally when it detects that that circuit is shorted low. Thing is, I don't know why. Why does it short low when I just push that in further? I don't know if this probe is making contact somewhere it shouldn't, or if it's maybe the terminal or wire. I think I'm kind of leaning towards that's where I'm going to actually find the problem, is that ECM X3, even though I already did check it. But that's going to have to wait till tomorrow because it's about 8 p.m. and I'm ready to call it a day. So I stuffed that in there as far as it'll go. It is not sticking out the other side. But I wouldn't be surprised if that probe just goes in too far and maybe touches one of these adjacent terminals. Or perhaps we have a problem with this blue and white wire. Maybe like a bad crimp or something. I mean, I've already done all this. I've wiggled it, I've pulled it with the engine running, never had a problem. Like I said, only time I've ever experienced that is when I just stuck the probe in a little too far. And I really can't tell if it's a problem with the vehicle or if it's just something I did.
So it is the next day and I am not driving to work. I am actually driving home again. A second day I'm driving the vehicle home. Last night when I put the PicoScope away, I did not even bother to connect the Pico to the vehicle for the drive to work today because I felt, why bother? There won't be any symptoms anyway, and I was right. No symptoms, no codes, nothing wrong with this vehicle. The only thing that I have in my hand is that at the ECM X3 connector, when I plug the Pico probe in a little too far, that's when it seems to drop out. And really, what can I do other than maybe de-pin those terminals at the ECM connector and check for maybe a bad crimp at the terminals or something like that. I have to think out of the box on this one because, like I said before, I have tested terminal tension on every terminal on that wiring schematic. I've tested all of the wiring. I tested end to end. I compared the circuits for all 4 injectors, and they're all the same. And really, this is becoming so difficult to duplicate. I am not making any progress, and therefore cannot make any progress and can't make any money on any other jobs. So that is another aspect of a difficult diagnosis, is just getting paid. I want to get paid for all of the time and effort that I spend on this vehicle, and if it is not broke for 99.9% of the time, how can I fix it? I can fix any problem on any car, I guarantee it, but it has to be broken. Okay, we are once again arriving at test site Nav Zeta. I'm going to do that one more check and de-pin the ECM terminal X3 or connector X3, the injector terminals. I'm going to do that one last test. I'm going to check ECM X3 and de-pin those terminals and just inspect the quality of the crimps. And after that, I'm throwing my hands up and giving up because I know I won't get paid for all the effort.
Psych, it's actually day 3. Day 2, I did drive the vehicle home again, but I ended up going to my daughter's basketball game, and by the time I got home, it was late. I was tired, I was cranky, I was over it. It is now day 3. I'm waiting for my grocery pickup order, and then I'm going to drive this customer's vehicle home a third day, 3 days in a row. By the time I make it home, I will have driven this vehicle just about 100 miles with no codes and no symptoms. So I'm kind of over it. I don't even know what to do anymore. The customer doesn't want the vehicle back. He even said so. We suggested maybe he should pursue a buyback, and he's okay with that. And it's understandable that he doesn't want it back because he's going to use this truck for towing. And makes sense. If you can't trust the vehicle, it's a brand new truck. If you can't trust it, what are you going to do? Get rid of it, get a new one. And not to knock it on the product, because this is the only truck that I have really seen this kind of problem with. Otherwise, this engine, this transmission, the Colorado, Canyon, whatever, I have not seen really any problems like this on these models. So this is just a difficult diagnosis, and that's how it goes sometimes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm at work now, and I'm just wrapping this up because I'm over it. I'm over it, the customer's over it, everyone's over it. I can't duplicate it. I've driven this vehicle over 100 miles without any symptoms. So I took the little cover off here so we could see what the terminals look like, and to me, they're so close together that I think that would be what causes, when I stick my probe in all the way, that's what's causing the short. So I'm just gonna put this back together, put the ECM back where it goes, and we're done. Difficult diagnosis. That's what it looks like when it's all put back together. Not really accessible, so that's why I had to pull it out like that. Okay, sometime later, at the insistence of the service manager, I am disassembling the engine to gain some access to the fuel injectors, which are way down here. Here's the rail. This is the cylinder 4 injector that is questionable. Here's that harness connector that I was talking about before. This is the half that I replaced. I replaced that harness, and it goes all, like, it wraps up there. See, it goes to each injector. So the harness itself, we can see, goes from here up here and then across the top. And I've inspected all of this before. I have not found anything. And then it goes right here to ECM X3. So from ECM X3 across the top to this connector. And I have not found any problems with the harness. So at the insistence of the manager, I'm going to replace the injectors. I don't know if it'll help. I don't know if it'll hurt. I don't think it'll hurt, but you know, at this point, what can I do? I told him I give up and let the guy buy it back. He's like, whoa, we can't do a buyback. I mean, I've driven it over 100 miles without any symptoms, and I'm really honestly over it. I hate working on this vehicle anymore. Digging down to the fuel injectors here because he wants me to replace the injectors so that in the customer's eyes, we've done something. And that harness goes up here, across, and to ECM X3. So ECM X3, I've inspected all of this. I've twisted it, I've wiggled it, I've bent it, I've pulled it, I've taken it loose. I have not found any problems with the harness. Very difficult to duplicate. Warranty time calls for about 4 hours to remove and reinstall the fuel injectors and reassemble. I don't know if that's entirely accurate. The hardest part of the whole job is this coolant manifold thing, so I'm still taking it apart. And here's a view of the fuel rail removed. This is the harness that I replaced last time. I did go ahead and replace all 4 injectors simply because that's what they want me to do. And after that, I will be reassembling and be done with this vehicle for now.